Hi, my name is Julie. I'm from Norway and I study applied math at the University of Bergen. My certificate track is climate change and the environment. And I was immediately interested in the BISP Certificate Program when I heard about this track, mainly because climate change is, in general, very relevant for every single person on this earth, since it affects all of us, and we all have a responsibility. It's a very much talked about subject, and it's a very real threat to the future of mankind. And my project is a paper called Petroleum Industry and Climate Change in Norway. Okay. So, why did I choose this topic? Firstly, Norway is my home country, and I really like the idea of being able to use content from my courses this semester to learn more about something that's relevant to my home, where I most likely will spend the majority of my life. Deciding that I wanted to do a project about climate change in Norway was easy. Then I was thinking about what the cause of the largest emissions in Norway is. And that is the petroleum industry. So then I decided to focus on that. And what interested me and still does interest me about this industry is the formation and extraction of petroleum. I'm very fascinated about how nature creates something that has so much energy stored in it and that we can use for so many different things. And I'm also really fascinated about what processes we have for extracting it. I'm also curious about how much importance the petroleum industry has had and has for the Norwegian economy and society, and how large of an impact the industry has on the environment, what the government is doing about it, and why are we still extracting petroleum if it's this bad for the environment. I chose the format of a paper since that's how I did believe that I could communicate my research in the best way possible, as it allows me to both explain things in written form, which I like, and it also allows me to include graphs and figures to visualize what I want to visualize. So a summary of my process, in addition to all my lectures and courses, my research has mainly consisted of researching using online resources. I spent a lot of time on the website called Norsk Petroleum. It translates directly to Norwegian Petroleum, and it's run by the Norwegian Petroleum Directorate. And here I found a lot of interesting information, and on the front page of the website they even write everything you need to know about Norwegian petroleum activities, and that fit my needs very well. Another great website I found was from National Geographic that explained petroleum in a relatively simple and easily understandable way, which I also found really useful. And I knew from the beginning that I wanted to find some numbers to create a graph or something to visualize how much petroleum Norway exports and how much it exports now and how much it has exported since discovery petroleum. So I went to the website of Statistics Norway, which is the National Statistical Institute of Norway and the main producer of official statistics, where I found the national accounts from 2021 and Norwegian industry numbers, which included how much oil and gas Norway had exported all the years from 1974 to 2021. So I downloaded the numbers and I added them to Excel, and then I plotted the graph, which you can see with the blue and orange colors. So what were the results of my research? Regarding how important the petroleum is for the Norwegian society, I found out that Norway is the 3rd largest exporter of natural gas and the 10th largest oil exporter in the world. The oil and gas sector in Norway is in fact Norway's largest sector in terms of value added, government revenue, investments, and export values. And in 2021, the export value of oil and gas stood for 59.9% of the nation's total export, which is a lot more than I expected. I thought maybe it would be like half, but almost 60% that I thought it would be. You can also see like on the top right, in the upper right corner, there's like, it says like most important export products in Norway in 2021. And you can see that like crude oil and natural gas is like way above like fish, which is like the third most important export product. I also found out that there were about 200,000 people directly or indirectly employed in the petroleum sector in Norway in 2020. So there's no doubt that petroleum plays like a really large role in the Norwegian society and economy. Regarding emissions, I found out that greenhouse gas emissions from the petroleum industry in Norway was in 2021 about 1/4 of the total greenhouse gas emissions in Norway. And that's actually less than I expected. For some reason, I thought it would be like half. I'm not sure why, but yeah, I was a bit surprised by seeing this. And I also figure out what is done to limit these emissions. I found out about policies that the Norwegian government has implemented to reduce these emissions from like emissions from the petroleum industry. We have carbon tax, and then Norway is also part of the EU Greenhouse Gas Emission Trading Act. And the chart in like the right corner, like the other chart, shows it shows like the emissions from the petroleum sector. And we can see that the emissions have not been as high as they were in 2008, which is actually the same year Norway joined the EU Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Act. So it shows that this probably has had some effect. So why is Norway stopping extraction immediately? We're hurting the environment. So like in conclusion, Norway is still producing and looking for more petroleum to ensure continuation of regular activities in the near future. The Norwegian society depends largely on fossil fuels, and like so does the entire world. This means that we can't transition to a petroleum-free society overnight. A sudden stop in petroleum activities in Norway would negatively affect human health and livelihoods that currently depend on fossil fuels. But since climate change is a huge danger, and there's no doubt that the petroleum industry largely contributes to global warming, we must start the transition to renewables. And policies like carbon tax and the EU Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Act act as like pushes people towards other more environmentally friendly options and make sure that we combust as efficiently as possible with as little emissions as possible where there are no other options. And hopefully in the long run, we can stop combusting fossil fuels altogether. So what I've learned, I've acquired more knowledge in general about petroleum. I learned a lot about like the importance of petroleum industry in Norway, economic importance, how many people are employed, and the large number of petroleum uses and products we have in our everyday lives, which I've added pictures of in this slide. I also learned a lot about the emissions from this industry and what measures the Norwegian government have to limit these emissions. I had heard about I didn't know that we had a carbon tax, but I did not know that about the EU Greenhouse Gas Emissions Trading Act. And I also learned that Norway works a lot on carbon capture and storage. I also learned about oil spills, and I was quite surprised about the fact that Norway hasn't had any major oil spills that has caused any like huge environmental damage. We've had some oil spills, mostly seabirds have died, but none of the oil spills have ever like gotten to shore. So yeah, how is this relevant for me? I believe that by gaining more knowledge about the petroleum industry in Norway, I believe that in the future, I will be more equipped to work with the challenges that come with climate change caused by this industry, which I believe to be very relevant, since, as mentioned, I will probably stay in Norway for the rest of my life. And as like an applied math student, I am considering working in the energy industry. So in the future, there would definitely be jobs for me to consider where one works with the transition to renewables and phasing out the petroleum industry, and or extracting petroleum with the least emissions as possible. And to do this, I believe that it's important to have a good foundation and understanding both the importance of the petroleum industry and how and why it causes climate change. Okay, thank you.
Well done, Julie. Round of applause. Well, I don't know about anybody else, but I find this to be such an important topic for each and every one of us. It's not only our present, but it's certainly our future. So thank you for diving into this very relevant topic and diving into the details and data and sharing it with us in a really cohesive way. I wanted to ask you, I have multiple questions, but I will open it up to others. I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, what were some of the most important takeaways as you were going through the research and starting your writing process of how each one of us individually can help this challenge, this climate challenge that we're all experiencing? Are there any certain takeaways that you came across or you're going to implement now?
That's a big question, but I believe when it comes to like individuals, we can all do small things, of course, like turning off the lights, like saving energy, and like reduce our consumption in general regarding like everything, like buy less clothes, turn off the taps and shower for a shorter time and all of those things. But I believe that I don't know, like if we want to like make a change on like a bigger scale, people need to like for me as a like applied math student, I can go find a job which works on renewable energy and works on developing these like more environmentally alternatives to things we use fossil fuels for today to like make sure that this transition is going to happen, and it becomes very clear to me that we need to make this happen because climate change is not a good thing, but still like it's sort of shocking how much we still depend on it, because like everyone agrees that we need to stop using fossil fuels and all of that, but it's not realistic to like stop today now. We have to work on it and like phasing it out and make sure that the transition is as smooth as possible, so that there are so that we get as few negative effects as possible.
Thank you. And I would love to open it up to other questions.
Well, I'm not sure if everybody agrees about that, but yeah, it's important, right? I mean, there are a lot of people who aren't too happy to get off fossil fuels.
That's true. But many people, at least I feel like the majority. But of course, there are some people who just want to stay in the past. But I want to go over to renewables, at least. Yeah.
For sure. That makes me wonder if there's been a global survey of people around the world, some representative sample regarding people's attitudes towards that.
Probably not, but it's like, I think it's very different. There's a lot of focus on it in like the industrialized like countries, like in the Western world, we have a lot of focus on that. But while in developing countries, I believe that there is a lot less education about it. And in like, they use a lot of like places where they still use a lot of coal, because it's like cheap and it's easily accessible. They don't necessarily have like the technology to like, to use like, I don't know, solar power or something. And for them, it's like more important to focus on like maybe making it from day to day rather than think about like the future 100 years from now. So I would think that there is definitely more focus and more awareness in the Western world than there is in developing countries.
Yeah, this is a tension that came up in one of the other presentations earlier as well. I want to thank you for the presentation, the aesthetics, very visually pleasing. I really like
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
Hi, Julie. I'll ask a question. Forgive me, you said this in your presentation. I didn't quite catch it. Did you say that you would like to work within the Norwegian petroleum industry in some capacity?
I do want to work in the energy sector, that I'm pretty sure of. I'm not sure yet exactly what I want to do, but maybe I would end up like in the petroleum industry because like they still need people. But I really consider like going to like working on like the renewables. I know there are a lot of like oil companies in Norway who are now focusing a lot about like developing renewables and wind power along the coast of Norway. And that I find really interesting because I mean, what's scary about like if I go into like the petroleum industry now in like 20 years, I won't have a job. So I need to think like, about like the future. And but yeah, I really do think you should like phase out the petroleum. And I think there are a lot of jobs in the renewables sector. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for clarifying. Energy as a category, but not necessarily petroleum. I see. Well, they need people like you. So help ease that transition.
Actually, I have a question. It's kind of thanks. Yeah, it was a great presentation. Yeah, very aesthetically pleasing. I agree with John there. I have sort of question. I mean, if you transition successfully from petroleum or fossil fuels, Norway, especially at this point, has a bit of a monopoly for Europe, right? So it's you keep saying you want to live in Norway. And it's a nice place. And it's a nice place because of the oil. So I was wondering, what would it mean for Norway to get off of oil? I mean, it's a small country. Farming's not so good. The land's not so fertile. It's I mean, aside from petroleum, what would that do to Norway as an economy and as a society, I wonder?
Actually, I really like your question because that's what sort of a lot of what interests me about like the future. Because I mean, in Norway, like a lot of like the young generation nowadays are like they go around screaming like we have to stop oil and all of that. But I don't think all of them really understand how much of like the welfare in Norway is built on the petroleum. And it's like there's a common question like, what will Norway live off after this? And it's difficult. The welfare probably won't be as good as this. Again, it's like probably like a lot of like when it comes to energy, Norway has a lot of like hydropower. So a lot of like our electricity is renewable already. I think the most important part of like I talk a lot about like the export of oil. I think we make a lot of money of it. It's not necessarily that we use a lot of the petroleum ourselves, but we sell a lot of it and make a lot of money of that. And we also have like the oil fund, which we like every year put like a lot of money into like invest for future generations. So I think a lot of the plan is like that during this transition, we're gonna have to use some of that money that we've saved, like made off the oil, while we develop new technologies and new things to live off. We most definitely will not live of agriculture because it's cold and it's dark and there's no sun. Hopefully we'll find something to live off. I don't know. Hopefully something, yeah, will probably be fine. Yeah.